right, it's 7:05.
Keith.
We is 7:05 here, Big 550 KTRS, and every Thursday we like to check in with St. Louisan, who's gone on to work for MLB TV. His name is Keith Costas, and he joins us every Thursday at 7:06. Good morning, Mr. Keith Costas.
Good morning to you, McGraw.
So it's interesting. You sit in a very interesting position as a St. Louisan. You know all about St. Louis, growing up here watching the Cardinals, and you also sit inside MLB TV, so you hear all the chatter on the national level about this Cardinal hacking scam or story. What are your thoughts, and what are you hearing from where you sit?
Yeah, the chatter, as you said, was virtually non-existent before that story came out. I think it was pretty much just the same as how everyone in St. Louis reacted to it. We were on the air, actually, when it happened, and we just saw it come across on Twitter from the Times. And it was kind of a bombshell. To be completely honest with you, I'd forgotten all about the Astros hacking situation when it came out without a team or an aggressor, so to speak, attached to it a couple of years back.
Right.
And if you hear the New York Times sports editor talk the last couple of days, it came together pretty quickly for them, too. It was on their radar for 24 hours at most before they got that story out, at least in terms of the particulars. So it definitely came out of left field. And I think what's come to light in the last, 48 hours or so, or at least where it looks like this thing is headed, was the reaction, was similar to the reaction of people, at least reasonable people who are plugged in around the game, that, their gut instinct was that this thing was not something coming directly from the top. I mean, who knows? It remains to be seen, obviously. Hopefully we'll find out, given that the FBI and the Justice Department are involved. But the consensus around our shop seemed to be this wasn't something that, was directly tied to Mo or certainly to DeWitt. And as we go through the early stages of this thing, that seems to be the way it's shaping up. Like I said, who knows where it goes, but that seems to be the consensus that's forming.
Yeah, how I'm curious, and we talked to a couple of ABC News people yesterday, comparing this to other sports scandals. Deflating the balls, Spygate, Bountygate, some of the other ones. How big do you think this is going to be? Because hacking into somebody's computer, taking air out of a ball is kind of a fun story to talk about. No one's really injured. But this, you're talking draft picks, you're talking inside information. This is a serious allegation. How big of a story do you think this will be?
I mean, I think it's a huge story already. If you looked around at other sports networks, a lot of times, we're used to baseball 24/7, obviously, here at MLB Network, but when you look at other sports networks, what ESPN was doing, even the news networks were doing, it was a lead story that first day. With other big sports stories going on, the Stanley Cup had just ended the night before, the NBA Finals was in an elimination game that night, and that's an ABC, ESPN-owned property, and they were pumping this story all day long. So, I mean, it's definitely a big deal. As far as the actual gravity of the charges and what actually went on, I don't think it's, in terms of actual results and in fact affecting the integrity of what these teams are all trying to do in terms of putting the team together and winning on the field, I think it's actually not too far removed from, from what we saw with the Patriots and other things like that in terms of, I don't think this yielded that much in terms of a competitive advantage. But obviously, at least in my eyes, and it seems like most people's eyes that have been commenting on this thing the last 48 hours, it's a way more egregious offense in terms of how calculated they were and what they were doing. A clear line was crossed. This is not something where you're going to have other GMs come out and say, oh, yeah, we snooped around a few times in some other people's files or some other people's systems, like you had quarterbacks coming out left and right about deflating the balls. I mean, this was obviously a terrible error in judgment, regardless of who it was actually pulling the string.
It's a great point. There's somewhat of a romance to scuffing a baseball and stealing someone's signs from the third base coach.
Exactly.
There is no romance to hacking into somebody's computer and stealing their draft board.
Nor is there romance with the term FBI investigation. That is not particularly romantic. You're on the wrong end of that one.
It does show you, though, that there was a lot of angst inside that Cardinal front office between the baseball people and the Moneyball people and Jeff Luhnow and everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, without having any inside knowledge of it beyond what I hear around here and just following the Cardinals like people in St. Louis do, I think there was a thought that when Walt Jocketty was fired, that Luhnow had kind of won the internal battles against, old school versus new school. He had kind of won out. There wasn't maybe as much harmony and symmetry as they wanted in the front office. And when they made that move and put Mo in place with Luhnow as kind of the lieutenant, so to speak, there was a perception that, everyone was on the same page. And to a certain extent, they obviously were. I mean, you don't have to look much further than what's happened on the field to know that their work and the front office's work as a whole has, produced just great results for them. But if you listen to these stories and, just the kind of buzz around this story, it makes you kind of recalibrate maybe just how harmonious that whole operation was.
Keith Costas with MLB TV. What's coming on the show the next couple of days? Anything we should know about?
Well, we've got some Cardinals talk on our show today. We're talking some Cubs. Cubs are they've been really impressive recently. They scored a bunch of runs last night, called up another one of their huge prospects last night, Kyle Schwarber, 4 hits in his debut. These guys just keep coming, these young guys for the Cubs. So we're talking a little bit of Cardinals, but a lot of Cubs on the show this morning, which might be of some interest to Cardinal fans.
The Cubs kicked a field goal last night to make it 17-0, right? Was that
They did. A couple football scores. It's kind of an interesting week around the league. It's what they call squeeze week, where they do these 2-2 home-and-home series with the AL and NL teams, and no team has a day off this week. So we've seen all kinds of craziness. There were 3 position players pitched last night and the night before. There's been all kinds of crazy 15-run games. It's just really weird goings-on when you don't give guys the day off and mix in a lot of weird travel.
Keith Costas, avoid the FBI investigation, and we'll talk to you next week.
I'll do what I can.
Thanks, man. Keith Costas with us, MLB TV. Great insight, great info, great stuff. Yes, thanks, Keith. 7:12 here, Big 550 KTRS.